They thought my family's century-old farm was nothing but an ugly obstacle in their path. Armed with forged papers and bulldozers, they demolished the barn my great-grandfather constructed with his own hands. It's for a community dog park, they claimed, hastily building one to appease the neighbors. But I uncovered their hidden plan for luxury condos lurking behind the sham. What the HOA president didn't know was that my grandfather had secured water rights to their entire subdivision decades earlier. After confronting her at their fake dog park opening and being brushed off, I turned a concealed valve that left 200 mansions without water in hours. Would you have the guts to wield a forgotten legal right to reclaim your family's stolen heritage? I'm Thomas Grayson, 55, and the Grayson family has tended this 15-acre farmstead since 1887. My great-grandfather bought this land with gold coins he'd saved from toiling in the Pennsylvania coal mines. He picked this spot for its natural spring and fertile soil, ideal for the sustainable farming he'd mastered back in the old country. My grandfather didn't just keep the farm alive. He devised an ingenious irrigation system during the Dust Bowl that eventually watered the whole county. He collaborated with state university engineers, pouring 3 years of the farm's earnings into a network that sustained not only our crops, but the entire community through droughts. A forward thinker, he locked in our rights with airtight legal documents that would later save everything we'd built. By the 1990s, developers turned the surrounding farmland into cul-de-sacs and tennis courts. I struck a deal with Westfield Development. My organic farm would stay independent, exempt from any future homeowners association. We signed contracts, filed them with the county, and shook hands. For 20 years, I grew prize-winning produce for local schools, food banks, and farmers markets. My wife, Ellen, and I raised our kids here, passing down the sustainable farming traditions our ancestors honed. Everything shifted when Laura Bennett, a 55-year-old retired corporate lawyer from Chicago, moved into the new Meadow Ridge Estates. With her flawless blonde highlights and constant country club glow, she swiftly took over as HOA president and set her sights on my unsightly farm. Certified letters started arriving, citing fake violations. My great-grandfather's silo was an unauthorized structure exceeding height limits. The iconic red barn, a tourist photo spot, didn't meet architectural standards, and the roosters crowing here for over a century were now noise violations in a residential zone. Every Monday, like clockwork, these threats came on thick, cream-colored HOA letterhead, demanding $100 daily fines. I called the county zoning office, who confirmed my farm's exemption from HOA rules under the original agreement. I tried the diplomatic route, inviting Laura for a tour, hoping she'd see the farm's history and value. Maybe the kids from Lincoln Elementary planting pumpkins or the veterans therapy group tending lavender would sway her. Instead, she rolled up in a white Range Rover with 3 board members, snapping photos of every worn fence post and tractor part as proof of blight. She recoiled at the compost pile and shrieked at a harmless garter snake. "This isn't personal, Thomas," she said with a rehearsed smile that never touched her eyes. "We're upholding community standards. Meadow Ridge residents paid top dollar for luxury homes, not to live next to this." The next day, her old law partner, Michael Harper, a real estate developer, offered $750,000 for land worth 3 times that. When I refused, his charm turned cold. "Reconsider, Mr. Grayson. That barn, those heirloom crops, the creek where your kids fish. How much are those memories worth compared to our offer?" Things get messy for stubborn holdouts who resist progress. When intimidation flopped, the harassment ramped up, baseless daily fines, anonymous complaints triggering environmental inspections, which found nothing, and even animal control checking my healthy livestock. My friend and lawyer, David Carter, reviewed the original agreements. "They have zero jurisdiction over you," he assured me. "This is illegal." We sent a cease and desist letter, earning 3 weeks of quiet. Then, unmarked survey stakes appeared along my eastern boundary, prime tomato-growing land for 5 local restaurants. They weren't just pressuring me, they were gearing up to seize it. Tuesday, April 18th, is seared into my memory. I was delivering produce to Lincoln Elementary when Ellen called, frantic. "They've got bulldozers at the property line, tearing down the fence. Hurry." I ditched the delivery and sped home in my old pickup. By the time I arrived, The century-old oak fence posts were shattered, and two yellow bulldozers were closing in on my barn, home to our antique tractor, heirloom seeds, and equipment passed down through generations. A crowd had gathered. Some HOA folks watched in dismay, others nodded approval. Laura stood behind a police line with two officers, smugly clutching a leather folder with what she called a legal seizure notice. One officer, her brother-in-law Deputy Paul Reed, restrained me when I tried to stop them. "This is illegal," I yelled as they cuffed me. "You have no authority on my private property." "All perfectly legal, old man," Reed sneered, shoving me into his patrol car. "County approved our community project. Should have taken the cash." From the cruiser, I watched them flatten the barn my great-grandfather built during the Great Depression with timber from our woods. Ellen filmed until they confiscated her phone for interfering. They missed the security cameras David had urged me to install weeks earlier. Those caught everything, including Laura telling the bulldozer driver, "Make sure that hideous barn's gone. We need clear views for the luxury condos." That slip would be her downfall. But in that moment, watching my family's legacy crumble, I felt helpless against their machine. 6 hours later, they released me. No charges, because none existed. I returned to Ellen surrounded by neighbors bearing casseroles and fury. This seizure notice was a fake, as David confirmed with the county administrator. "This is criminal," he fumed. "Forged documents, trespassing, fraud." We filed for an emergency injunction as I surveyed the wreckage. My barn in splinters, an acre of topsoil bulldozed, and iron fencing around a Bennett Community Dog Park sign. At the next day's emergency hearing, we faced Laura's lawyer and Judge Henry Sullivan, a silver-haired golf buddy of her husband's. Their claim? My land was absorbed by the HOA via adverse possession, despite clear records proving otherwise. I laid out my evidence. The 1887 deed with my great-grandfather's signature, 1,912 water rights certificates from the Dust Bowl, and the 1994 agreement exempting my farm from HOA control. Most damning, David played the security footage. The courtroom hushed as Laura's condo confession echoed. Her face paled. "Your Honor," David argued, "this is fraud, trespassing, and abuse of process." Judge Sullivan, squirming, granted a temporary injunction halting further work but delayed a full ruling for 3 months. That night, poring over papers with David in my kitchen, we found gold, a 1912 water rights clause. My grandfather had secured exclusive control over the aquifer feeding the subdivision, with easements conditional on respecting my farm's boundaries. Laura's bulldozers had voided those terms. "He built a private water utility," David marveled. "If your rights are violated, you can cut off their water with 30 days' notice, no court needed." Meadow Ridge had tapped my system to save costs, a shortcut now they're undoing. The next day, David filed discovery requests, unearthing emails between Laura and Pinnacle developers. Their plan? Bennett Heights condos on my land. "The old farmer doesn't know what he's got," Laura wrote. "We'll force the water rights or use eminent domain. The ROI will justify it." They'd misjudged. My rights couldn't be condemned without years and millions. While the case crawled through court, Laura pushed ahead, erecting fancy fencing and benches for the dog park's grand opening. I consulted water rights expert Patricia Ellis, who confirmed my grandfather's documents were ironclad. I filed a 30-day termination notice for the easements, delivering copies to the HOA and all 200 homes. Some residents slammed doors, others listened, alarmed. Laura dismissed it as a bluff at an emergency meeting. "He can't shut off our water, the county won't allow it." She didn't grasp rural water law. My rights predated modern rules and were untouchable. Day 31 was her park's opening. Dressed in my worn overalls and straw hat, I confronted her mid-event. "What are you doing on my land?" I demanded, holding my papers. "This is community property," she snapped. I turned to the crowd. "Did she tell you about the condos she's planning? The forged papers she used to steal my farm?" Murmurs spread. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "No, you will," I replied. "Restore my rights by sundown, or your water's gone." They ignored me, so that night, Ellen and I went to the stone pump house my grandfather built. I turned the main valve, redirecting water to our reservoir. By afternoon, sprinklers failed. By evening, faucets ran dry. Laura called, livid. Turn it back on. This is illegal. No, I said. You violated my easements. Restore my land and pay damages, or stock up on bottled water. By morning, Meadow Ridge was chaos. No showers, no toilets, wilting lawns. Residents turned on the HOA, not me. Old-timers like Bob and Clara Hayes rallied a meeting, inviting me to speak. In my work clothes, I shared Laura's condo plot, the fake papers, and the video. I don't want to hurt families, I said. I just want my farm back. A news report revealed Laura's husband's $250,000 Pinnacle stock deal, fueling outrage. By day 3, 85% of residents demanded the board resign. On day 5, Judge Maria Torres mediated. With residents in Save Grayson Farm buttons, she ruled my water rights valid and urged Laura to settle. The new board agreed. Full restoration, compensation, and permanent HOA exemption. I turned the water back on as they signed. Laura quit, faced a DA probe, and lost her law license. The community rebuilt my barn with an education center, launched farm dinners, and passed Grayson's Law to protect farmland. Pinnacle scrapped their plans. Standing in my restored barn with newfound friends, I saw the irony. The HOA's attack had united us around the farm they tried to erase. My grandfather knew some rights, hidden in plain sight. Wait generations to defend what matters most.